Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kate, and today I'm going to be shifting into more of my 2025 content. I've been doing some of my end of year stuff here in January, and I know it's a little bit late in the month to be doing some of this, but I really wanted to do at least a 25 in 2025, and I might have one or two others by the end of this month, so I can catch up on that. Now, last year, what I did for my 24 in 2024, which I don't think I ever officially put on the channel, is I had picked like 4 categories and that I fit my books into. This year, I saw Bree from Four Paws and a Book do a bingo board for her 25 in 2025, and I really love that bingo board idea. I also saw my friend Kerstin do this, so I am participating in Bree's version of this, so I'll talk about each of the squares and what book I am picking for that square. If you have not already picked your 25 in 2025, I think this is a really fun way to do it. And then the other caveat I had for myself is I really wanted to use this list to prioritize my anticipated reads, so about half of this list is going to be 2025 new releases that I'm excited about. A quarter are 2024 releases I didn't get to, and then about the last quarter are backlist titles that I really wanted to prioritize this year. And starting with the first square, which is of course 2025 release, I picked the 2025 release that I am most anticipating, and this will not be a surprise for anybody who knows about my reading last year. One of my favorite books of the year was The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson, so one of my most anticipated is the sequel to that, A Drop of Corruption. This is the second book in the Shadow of the Leviathan series, which is a fantasy mystery blend following 2 investigators, Anna Dolabra and Din. What is Din's last name? I don't remember Din's last name, but anyways, Anna and Din. In this case, it's starting as a locked room murder mystery, and then it looks like it's maybe going to extend to more. I'm on board. I love Anna and Din. I can't wait to see what Robert Jackson Bennett has in store next for them. The next square is one word title, and for this I'll be picking up the Start to a Duology, which a couple of my friends have heavily recommended to me. They really think I'll like it, and I really want to read the newest book, which is sort of a spin-off title as far as I understand. So the series is Raybearer, and the sequel is also a one-word title, Redemption, so I feel like this is kind of the perfect fit for this square. All I really know is that it's YA fantasy that has a lot of found family elements. The main character is sort of competing to be part of a companion group around the Crown Prince, but her mother is tasking her with killing the Crown Prince. So it should be an interesting dynamic, and I'm hopeful that this one will work for me. The next one is a book involving travel. And for that, I'm picking something that might be a little bit of a stretch, but I know the characters in this one are at least traveling from England to Wales, so it kind of involves some travel. And that's going to be The Geographer's Map to Romance by India Holton. This is the second book in her Love's Academic Historical Romance with a teensy bit of fantasy series. The first one was The Ornithologist Field Guide to Love, I think. These titles are so hard for me with every single one of her books, but I tend to enjoy her brand of humor. This one, the 2 main characters are in a marriage, but they're estranged and have been since their wedding day. And it's described as the 2 professors must come together as a team in the face of perilous conditions like explosions, domesticated goats, and only one bed. So I feel like that gives you sort of a level set for what this book is going to be, and I'm very excited about it. The next square is number in the title, and I actually really struggled with this one because I couldn't quite decide which of my books I wanted to use for it. I think I am landing on One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. This is a fantasy romance that I've heard hyped up a lot, but have not gotten around to myself. Really all I know about it is that the main character has a sort of shadow demon voice in her head. It involves tarot card magic. And then I think she has to reluctantly team up with some smuggler guy. So that's basically all I know. It seems like a lot of people really enjoy it. I'm super hit or miss on romantasy, but we'll see how it goes. I do have the backup option of Between Two Fires by Christopher Buehlman if One Dark Window doesn't end up working for me. But I also have a number of medieval horror books on my list, so I didn't want to add yet another one here. The last square on this row is cover by, and for that one I absolutely had to pick The Starving Saints by Caitlin Starling. The moment I saw this cover, I absolutely fell in love with it. It is highly reminiscent of medieval manuscripts, which is one of like my secret nerd things that I love, and or not so secret if you know me very well. And basically all I know about this plot is that it involves a castle that's under siege until a mysterious lady and her saints show up, and then it descends into some bacchanalian crazy feast time. So it sounds like it's going to be pretty messed up, but entertaining. So I'm really curious to see where Starling takes this. The previous books I've read from her have a lot of like toxic female relationships and complicated characters. So I'll be very interested to see what happens with this one. And it did have the buzzword of Lady Night for me, so definitely caught my interest. Starting on the second row, we have a seasonal book. And Bree mentioned this as basically a book that fits whatever season you're reading it in, which I'm thankful for, because the way I first took this was that it had to be like a Halloween or Christmas book, and I don't love those. So I'm excited that I don't have to do that. I'm still going to be stretching this. My initial thought was to read a horror book in October, and I am still going to read this in October, but it's probably considered more dark fantasy than horror, and that's Asunder by Kerstin Hall. I have been very interested in this book. I don't know why I keep not picking it up. It came out in 2024, features a main character who is a death speaker, and she's made a bargain with some kind of eldritch entity in order to be able to do that. Ends up accidentally binding herself to a stranger, and they have to try to figure out how to undo that. And it is technically has horror listed second on its genres in Goodreads, so I feel somewhat justified, plus it's about death, but it's not quite horror, so a little bit of a stretch. The next square is LGBTQ+ rep. I actually have quite a few books on my list here that would qualify for that, but the one I'm singling out for this particular square is Hammajang Luck by Makana Yamamoto. I've been really excited for this for a while because it's sold as for fans of Gideon the Ninth and Six of Crows, which are two of my favorite series ever. It is a sort of cyberpunk heist story with a sapphic relationship at the center of it. From looking at some of the reviews, I've also heard that there's trans, non-binary, and lesbian rep in here, so I'm really excited for this one and hoping it lives up to the hype for me. The next square is favorite author's new release, and there was really only ever one book that was going to be picked for this one, and that is The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. I fell in love with First Law when I first picked it up like 10 years ago, and I've really enjoyed Abercrombie's writing style in that, so I am really curious to see what he does with a new series. This one, following a theme for 2025, I guess. Feels like it almost fits into the medieval horror category because you have Brother Diaz, who's putting together a group of monsters, basically, at the behest of the Pope, in order to deal with an invasion of the elves. So, like, all of this is very intriguing to me. I have heard from some early reviews that each of the characters in this story are based on some kind of monster, so like vampire, werewolf, and they are going to be illustrations for this that look so much like the Byzantine portraits. They look gorgeous. I'll post some pictures of them up here when I do the editing, and man, I am so stoked for this. I really hope it lives up to the hype that I have for it. And speaking of hype, the next square is Hyped Book, and for this one, I had to pick Quicksilver by Callie Hart. Like I said, mixed success with Romantasy, but I have heard so many people shouting about this one. All I really know about it is that the main character is a human who accidentally opens up a gateway to the Fae realm and has to basically team up with one of the Fae in some capacity. It is super long, which scares me, but I have heard so many rave reviews for it that I figure I have to try it, and if it doesn't work for me, I'll pick some other hyped book. Then the final square on this row is Color of the Year, and Brie gave a couple different options for this one. One was you can use the Pantone Color of the Year, which is Mocha Mousse, I believe. It's sort of like a mid-color brown. Or you can use like the Goodreads color for the reading challenge. I ended up going with the Pantone color because it worked for Lone Women by Victor LaValle. The cover for this one has a range of browns on it, so I'm counting it. And I'm excited about this one. I've had it on my list. I feel like it came out a couple years ago. I don't remember for sure. And it's sort of a weird Western that follows a woman who is carrying something in this mysterious chest that has basically destroyed everything in her past. And she is now homesteading, I think in Montana, in the American frontier. And this is, I believe, early 1900s. So I'm very intrigued to see what Victor LaValle does with this. I love when he combines some sort of eldritch element with a historical element. So I'm honestly surprised I haven't picked it up yet, but I'm excited to see what he does. The next square, thankfully, is a nice short one, and that is a novella. For this, I am picking up The Butcher of the Forest by Premee Mohamed. I have really enjoyed Mohamed's previous short fiction, so I'm hoping I'll really like this one. It is another dark fantasy. I don't know why 2025 for me was the year of dark fantasy, but it follows a woman who's basically tasked with going into this very wild, very dangerous forest to rescue the children of this tyrant king. And she's given basically the option of find the kids or die. So it should be interesting. I've heard from some friends it's pretty dark, so I'll have to be in the right mood to pick this one up, but I'm very hopeful for it. The middle square is 5-star prediction, and this was actually super easy for me because I had already pulled this book out as something that I feel like has to be a win for me. And that is Small Miracles by Olivia Atwater. I have read pretty much everything else that Atwater has written at this point, all of her Regency fairy tales, as well as her newest, the Victorian fairy tale book, and I love her writing so much. This one will be quite a bit different because it's more of like a Good Omens style instead of the Fae and history. Instead of the Fae historical romance vibes that she's had in the other books I've picked up, this follows a fallen angel who's basically made a bet with an angel about getting a mortal to sin a little bit. And it looks like it's going to have a lot of good humor and fun footnotes. I'm a little worried it'll be too cozy for me, but I'm still hoping that Olivia Atwater will hit the right balance of that for me. So the next one is Comped, which is basically if you get all of those comparisons like the one I talked about with Gideon the Ninth meets Six of Crows, so it's that kind of idea where it's being compared to other books that you may have read. So the one that I picked for this one is one that I'm actually pretty scared of, but again, the comparison that the publishers have for it is so strong and so weird that I have to pick it for this square, and that is Metal from Heaven by August Clarke. And this is comped as Gideon the Ninth meets Princess Bride, which is two wildly different books that I'm interested to see if I can pick out why they think those two things in particular. But the basic premise for this one is that one of the characters is a sole survivor of the massacre of a bunch of striking workers. It has sort of a steampunk maybe vibe to it. And she's been making a living as a highwaywoman, robbing people and plotting her revenge against this company. And then she finds out that the daughter of the man who ordered the massacre is looking to marry. And is planning on basically making herself a suitor. As someone who really doesn't love revenge stories because they tend to be fairly toxic, I'm interested to see how this one works out for me. I have definitely heard people say that the comparison to Gideon the Ninth in terms of some of the denser writing style and having to figure it out as you go are spot on. So I'm excited to see how I feel about that, even though the revenge part scares me. The final square on this row is a friend rec, and I had a lot of options to choose from because thankfully I have a lot of friends recommending me books. And for this one, I'm going to pick one that I've had a couple friends that used to be in a book club with me really love, and Kerstin from Kerstin is Fully Booked had this on her top 10 books from 2024, and that is The Curse of Chalion by Lois McMaster Bujold. I've been wanting to read something from Bujold for a long time. She's been writing sci-fi fantasy for a very long time, since like the 90s, I think. And I really want to check out her Vorkosigan saga, but I think Curse of Chalion will be an easy enough entry into this. And I want to see, I've heard this is very political fantasy, very character driven, so I'm very curious to check it out. I really know very little about the plot of this book, other than that the main character comes back from either disgrace or something in his past and is sort of broken, both mentally and physically, but gets tasked with being a tutor for this princess in a very high-profile, dangerous court. So I'll be very interested to see how I end up feeling about it. Regardless of how I feel, I will still pick up Vorkosigan, but I think this will be my first from Bujold. And then the square that honestly is probably the scariest for me, and that is a book over 400 pages. I could have put this in for a couple other categories, including Friend Rec, and that is The Raven Scholar by Antonia Hodgson. This is a 2025 release coming out sometime in April. I don't remember the exact day. And this one really scares me because it's a debut that's over 700 pages, but I've heard such rave reviews for it that I felt like I had to at least give it a shot. And it's a fantasy mystery that's following a scholar who has to investigate a murder. I guess that's also a theme for me. That's happening during the competition for finding a new emperor. So it seems like it could be really interesting. I've heard the world building's incredible. So I am hoping that this will be one of the few chonky books that I actually get excited for. The next square is special edition, and I'm laughing only because I have about 5 million special editions I could have picked for this. I had a buying spree with those in the last couple years that I'm trying to trim down. And the book I ended up picking for this is one that I actually own 3 special editions of, so I felt like I had to prioritize it this year, because why have 3 copies of the book if you don't absolutely love it? And that is The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Catherine Arden. I've mentioned this in a previous vlog that I just keep not picking this one up. And that's because it's historical fantasy set during World War I, which is a tough topic. I'm really curious to see how Arden handles it. I've previously really loved her historical fantasy. So hopefully I'll be in the mood to pick this up relatively soon and find out if I actually want all those editions. The next square is chapter titles, so instead of just having a number for each chapter, there's got to be some word or phrase as well. And for this one, I am picking a series that I just have been anticipating the end of so much because I have adored the first 2 books in this series. And that is Holy Terrors, which is the 3rd book in Margaret Owen's Little Thieves series. I absolutely adore the main character, Vanya, who starts as this former maid turned thief. It's kind of upending the Goose Girl myth. It's sort of upending the Goose Girl fairy tale. And she's just so complicated and just like a great version of a sort of morally gray but extremely sympathetic main character. I love the way this YA fantasy series is so positive about figuring out what you want in your life, figuring out where you fit into things, because Vanya is very much not in the mold of a good girl necessarily, but she's just trying to figure things out for herself, and I just absolutely adore it. So I can't wait to see what Owen is going to do. I'm scared, but also just want more Vanya. The next square is debut author. I actually have a couple of these on my list. For this one, I am picking Aunt Tigress by, I'm hoping I don't totally screw this up. I tried to look it up, but no promises. Emily Yu-Xuan Chin. And this one is described as snarky urban fantasy novel inspired by Chinese and First Nation mythology and bursting with wit, compelling characters, and LGBTQIA plus representation. I think the main character is some kind of monster who's had to turn over a new leaf and stop eating people, and then ends up getting chased by some other monsters through the city and has to figure out what's happening and sort of navigate her past. So it sounds very intriguing. I have high hopes for it, especially the snarky buzzword there, so here's hoping I love it. Then the final square on this row is mental health rep. And for that, I am picking another romantasy. I'm trying to balance out some of my genres here. And I am going to read Phantasma by Callie Smith. This is another hyped romantasy that I've heard a lot of people talking about. It has a competition. The main character has some kind of death magic and has to enter this competition to save her sister. Ends up teaming up with one of the other people there, who of course is dangerous and possibly untrustworthy. The way people describe this is very intriguing to me. I was never a big Danny Phantom fan, but the idea of integrating that with a romantasy title is very intriguing to me, so we'll see how it plays out, but hopefully it'll be fun. And the mental health rep for this one is that the main character has OCD, and I have heard from people who also have that it is good representation. Okay, we're getting down to the last 5 here. So, I know when Bree created this square, so it's Snake on the cover, but she specifically created this square to encourage people to read House of Bane and Blood by Alexis L. Maynard. Of course, I decided to put together my TBR after I'd already read House of Bane and Blood, so that made my choices a bit more challenging. The only book I could come up with that I really wanted to read and thought I would still be excited for later on in the year, which was my challenge last year where I picked books I was excited about but then got less excited about, was a book that had very technically, has a snake on the cover because one of the characters is holding a snake on his staff, and that is The God in the Gumiho by Sophie Kim. This follows a Gumiho, which I think is like a nine-tailed fox type character, who's working in a coffee shop, basically in hiding from what she's done in her past. And a trickster god is essentially tasked with finding her and finding a demon who's kind of escaped to the earth in order to make his way back to the heavens. I have heard there's a very fun petty dynamic between the Gumiho and the god in this book, and that it's kind of just like a fun K-drama feel time. So I'm super excited to try this one out. The next square is self-published, and this is a pretty easy one. I have a lot of self-published stuff on my Kindle, but I also have the second book in a series which I really wanted to get to this year because the previous one ended up in my honorable mentions last year. And that is The Tomb of the Sun King by Jacqueline Benson, the second book in a sort of historical adventure with a touch of romance series that has very strong vibes of the Mummy movie. The main character is a suffragette who in the first book finds this magical artifact and decides to basically leave her job where she's been let go for participating in protests and go on her own adventure to track this down, because otherwise she would just be leaving it to her. She would not be allowed to be part of the expedition for it. So this one takes place in Egypt after the events of the first one, so I don't want to get into a lot of details, but I really loved the banter in this. I love the historical detail. Benson does an amazing job of having it be sort of an adventure romance, but also having a lot of anti-colonial themes in it, which I really appreciate about it. So I'm very curious to see her take on an Egyptian adventure. Then I have a new to you author. For this one, I wanted to add another sci-fi to my list. And this is an author that I have bought a number of her books because I am just convinced that I will absolutely love them and that it's the kind of sci-fi I enjoy, as I can be a little bit picky about that genre. But the synopses for her books just always sound so good. And the one I'm picking is The Light Brigade by Kameron Hurley. And this could be a win or it could be a total miss for me because it sounds like it's going to be doing some playing around with memory and with timelines. The main character is a new recruit in a corps of soldiers who are fighting a war on Mars. And basically the way they're transported to and from the battlefield is via light travel, where they're basically deconstructed and then sent via light and then constructed there and then reverse the process on the way back. But they don't come back exactly the same. And this new recruit's memories are different from everybody else in the corps. So it'll be really interesting to see if this is one that works out for me, but I'm hoping that Kameron Hurley will be a new favorite. Then the next one is an easy one because I am bad about staying up to date with my TBRs, and that is TBR Vet, so something that's been on your TBR before. This one was an easy pick because this is without a doubt the series I most want to make progress on this year and ideally finish. And that's the Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee. So I will be picking Jade War for this square, which is the second book in that series. If you are a fan of character-driven urban fantasy, highly recommend this series. I know I'm not the only one. There's about 5 million people that love the Greenbone Saga. It is very hyped, but I am definitely on the hype train with this one and excited. Both excited and scared to continue. The final square is to pick a book from another year-long challenge that you're doing, and for that I am picking one of the books that is on my Our Fantasy Bingo challenge, and that is The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu. This one I am currently reading, so cheating a little bit putting it on here, but man, this is a challenge for me. So I'll have more thoughts about it on my monthly wrap up, but I am glad I picked it for this because I needed the motivation to get through a book that's very much out of my comfort zone. The basic premise for The Grace of Kings is that it is this story of a rebellion where you have sort of a former bandit leader and the son of a nobleman, and they end up working together to overthrow this very oppressive empire. It is heavily based on Chinese history, and it's really well written. So I would definitely recommend picking it up if you are into historical fantasy and you want a very epic feel to it. I do have some complaints about it so far, but again, I'll talk about that later. So I'll just be happy to be marking off a square already for this one. So that is my list of 25 books that I want to read in 2025. I am going to be doing regular updates about this list and how it's going so that I can keep better track than I did in 2024. Let me know either what you thought of any of these books or the book that you are prioritizing in 2025. Also, feel free to give me multiple books if you want. And if you're not feeling chatty, then just leave me a stack of books for the stack of 25 that I have ahead of me here. And I will see you in the next one. Bye!